what I want you to do is go to the page in your workbook that has the diagram or the map that we call the Focus, Notice, Awareness Circle. So on that map, you will see we have one larger circle, and that circle we have labeled, or I want you to label, awareness. Now on the inside, there's a smaller circle that's right in the center of the larger one. What I want you to do is label that one focus. Perfect. Now you will notice that there are three smaller circles, and I just picked three, so it's not like there's only three. There could be 2, 4, usually many more, but these are just for examples. And I want you to label one of these smaller circles notice. Now they're all the same, but for our purposes here, we can just label the one notice. So now your map should be labeled. The large circle is labeled with awareness. The smaller one in the center is labeled focus. And one of the three smaller ones is labeled notice. And as you'll see, there's one circle that we haven't labeled yet, and it's the one that's outside of the others. And that one I want you to label I am. Okay? Perfect. Now, I'll explain. So this I call my Focus, Notice, Awareness Cup. And this is probably the most valuable, spiritual growth and manifesting tool that I have. And I'm going to use it to explain our Focus, Notice, Awareness map. And as you've seen in the manual, we refer to it as a coffee shop, if you will, of our awareness. So now I'm going to explain to you why we call it the coffee shop. So I'm going to take this map and give you an explanation using my tool here, how it applies in our physical world. So, pretend we're in a coffee shop. Oh, and by the way, the outside of this cup I've labeled awareness. The inside I've labeled focus. So we're sitting in the coffee shop, and the coffee shop's full. And you know how when you're in a busy place like that and there's all these conversations going on, that they all sort of blend together and they form almost like, a white noise, or the buzz, of the coffee shop, right? Okay, so you and I are sitting at the table, and we've put focus around this table. And as we go into the workshop, we're actually going to talk about, or further into the workshop, we're going to talk about what the name of that table is. But for our purposes here, that's the table we're sitting at, is the one in the center that you've labeled focus. Okay, so here's the scenario. Oh, and by the way, the smaller circles, those three, those are all the other tables in the restaurant. So think of this map, as it applies to the physical, as an overview of the restaurant that we're sitting in. So the awareness circle is the entire coffee shop. The table we're sitting at is the one in the center. And as I said, the smaller ones around it are all the other people sitting at the other tables. So I am focused on our conversation, and I'm aware of the buzz in the coffee shop. Okay, you got me? We've all experienced this, yes? Okay, so I'm focused on our conversation. I'm aware of the buzz in the coffee shop. Now, every so once in a while, I may notice certain things from my surroundings, right? So, maybe somebody a couple of tables over drops a fork, right? And so I'm focused, right? And I notice it plunk as the fork drops, right? So I notice it, but my focus is here. I may even notice the odd word, or the odd, even sort of phrase from, a table over here or a table over here. Again, my focus is here, and I notice those other things. I may even notice, let's say somebody in the kitchen, drops a plate, right? And my focus is here. I notice that, smash as the plate drops. But here's where my focus is. My focus is on our conversation. You with me so far? Great. Now, somebody 3 tables over, I notice, says the word manifesting. And I think to myself, wow, I wonder what they're talking about. And now I make a decision. This is the important thing to understand, and I will get to sort of the principles after we go through this example. I make a decision. I choose to change what I focus upon. and I take my focus from our conversation over to what's happening 3 tables over. And have you noticed when you do that, even though the restaurant hasn't emptied out, they aren't speaking any louder, you can pretty much, hear what that conversation is, can't you? But here's what's also has happened. Because I've changed my focus from our conversation over to this one, now I can hear this one better, but guess what? You now blend into the white noise or the background noise of the restaurant. Isn't that right? And often the only time that we are aware that our focus has left this table is when the other person says something like, are you listening to me? And then here's what happens. We go zoom back to here and we, oh my goodness, how long have I been gone? Right? We'll say that, won't we? We'll say, wow, and maybe I'm not talking just about a coffee shop. Maybe it's a meeting. Maybe it's a presentation. Maybe it's driving down a highway somewhere, and you realize that you suddenly missed the last 5, 6, 7, 10 miles. And we'll even say that. We'll say, gee, where was I? Or where I was gone for the last period of time. And that's a very accurate statement. And here's the 2 important principles behind this, and this is so important that you understand this, because this is the primary way that we navigate our non-physical world, which we'll talk about later, and the ability, the understanding of these concepts and the ability to use these tools is paramount to being an efficient manifester. And here's the principles. Principle number 1. We have very little control over what we notice. Correct? I'm sitting in the restaurant and I notice things, right? You notice the fork, you notice the word, maybe you notice somebody come into the restaurant. So we don't have a lot of control over what we notice. But we have total control over what we choose to focus upon. Now this is really important. These are 2 very unique aspects of our experience. We notice things, and then we choose what we will focus upon. Principle number 1. Principle number 2. Whatever we focus on gets bigger. Yes, this conversation. Or if I go over here, what happened? That conversation essentially got bigger. And then also what goes along with that is what we don't focus on gets smaller, or the relevance that it has and the effect that it has in our present moment experience gets greater or less. What we focus on gets bigger. What we don't focus on gets smaller. For me, there's 2 fundamental reasons that people aren't effective manifestors, and really just even aren't effective in so many ways at managing just their life experience, is because first of all they aren't aware of these unique aspects of this landscape. And as I said, I've used a purely physical example, but as we'll talk about later on, in the hemisphere of our thoughts, it plays a huge role. They don't understand that, and the second one is they have a very weak focuser muscle. So what happens is, I'm focused on this conversation, and then whatever I notice, over goes my focus, over goes my focus, over goes my focus. And it's kind of like shiny object, shiny object, shiny object. And as soon as I notice it, whoop, there goes my focus. And of course, when it leaves here, it goes there, and it's left here. And for me, the other piece of that is, then so many of us aren't even aware where our focus is. So how do we know when it's left? And how can we manage where our focus is and use that principle of focusing on something gets bigger, not focusing on something gets smaller, if we're not even aware where our focus is or where our I am is, which is the last circle on our diagram, right? So, and you'll see this play out in the continuation of this workshop, that wherever our focus is, very effectively, we are there too. Using the example of the coffee shop. When my focus is on our conversation at this table, I am here. if my focus changes from here over to that table 3 tables over, very effectively, I am there. Oh, my body may be here, I may even be looking at you, but where I am is not here. It's over there. And I'll give you a little hint or a foreshadowing of the next aspect of our workshop. In that table that we're sitting at, that circle, that small one in the center that we put focused around, the name of that table is the present moment table. What's the present moment table? That's right here in this moment. And guess where we have the most and frankly the only ability to initiate profound, long-lasting change in our life experience? In this present moment. But so often, we, I'm not saying our body, but us, and we'll talk about that, and we've actually alluded to it in a variety of ways in the workshop and the manual, we aren't there. We aren't in this present moment. And there's two primary places, and again, we'll delve into this a lot more later. There's two primary places where we are. And we are usually reliving the past, thinking about something that has happened. Oh, we go through the day, right? We can go through the motions. But our I am, where we are, is reliving the past or pre-living the future. And we spend a surprisingly little amount of time with our focus residing in this moment. Our focus, notice, awareness, BAP. Our focus, notice, awareness, cup. Welcome to one of the primary spiritual tools in our arsenal that allows us to be effective manifestors of our desires.